My name is Elise Rowan, and I'm 36 years old. If you'd looked at my life on paper a few months ago, you'd probably have said something like, she's fine, she's safe, she's got it together. Decent apartment in a quiet building, plants that only died if I forgot to open the blinds for a week, every bill on autopay. My car wasn't fancy, but it started every single morning, even when the weather and traffic were both miserable. I contributed to my retirement account like it was a religion, even when it meant saying no to trips my friends swore we'd tell our future kids about someday. None of that happened by accident. I built my life one spreadsheet at a time: rent, groceries, emergency fund, Roth IRA. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I was the sensible one, the friend with jumper cables in the trunk and a backup charger in her bag. The emergency contact people wrote down on forms because they knew I'd actually answer and actually show up. And for almost 4 years, I thought I was also the woman in a normal, stable relationship. I met my boyfriend, Darren, through work connections, a friend of a colleague. We crossed paths at a networking event where the appetizers were terrible and the name tags kept falling off. He was easygoing, funny in a low-key way, said he liked how I actually seemed like a grown-up in a room full of overgrown teenagers in blazers. We started casually. Drinks after work here and there, a movie, a lazy Sunday afternoon that turned into ordering takeout and falling asleep on my couch. By the 6-month mark, it had become serious without us ever having a big, dramatic conversation about it. It just settled into place. After 2 years, he moved into my apartment. It felt natural at the time. He brought his coffee grinder and his too big TV. I cleared space in my closet and bathroom drawers. We split rent and utilities, though I handled actually paying them because, well, that's what I do. We built routines, shared grocery lists, alternating who did the dishes, talking about the future in vague, comforting shapes. Maybe a dog someday. Maybe a bigger place when the lease was up. Maybe a wedding eventually, when the timing was right. Nothing flashy, nothing chaotic. Just two adults building something, or so I thought. Around late November, something changed. The first time I really noticed was a Wednesday. He texted me around 6, running late, don't wait up, grabbing food with a friend. I was already chopping vegetables, so I just sighed, wrapped up what I'd prepped, and threw together a smaller dinner for one. I ate while scrolling, half watching some show on my laptop, the way you do when you're not really watching anything at all. By 11:30, I was still awake on the couch, more out of habit than any real intention to wait up. I heard his key in the lock, the soft click of the door, his footsteps on the hardwood. "Hey," I called from the couch. "How was your night?" "Fine. Tiring." He shrugged off his coat, but something about his movements felt stiff, careful. "Where'd you guys end up?" I asked, just making conversation. He froze halfway through pulling his sleeve inside out. "Out with friends," he said. "Which friends?" I pressed lightly, smiling so it didn't sound like an accusation. He sighed, the kind of exaggerated exhale people use when they want you to know you're being annoying. "Does it matter, Elise? I was with my best friend. She's going through something and needed to talk." "Oh." I sat up a little. "Is everything okay with her?" "It's personal," he said quickly. "I don't want to get into it right now." He hung his coat, grabbed a glass of water, and walked straight to the bedroom like the conversation had never started. I stayed on the couch, suddenly very aware of the empty takeout container and the cold light from my laptop screen. There was this small, sharp feeling in my chest, like I'd done something wrong just by asking a normal question. That became the pattern. He'd leave after work, or randomly later in the evening, come home past midnight, and offer up the same vague answers. Out. Helping a friend. Don't wait up. Always with that thin edge in his voice if I asked for anything more specific, like I was shining a flashlight somewhere I wasn't supposed to. By mid-December, it was happening 3 or 4 times a week. Most evenings, it was just me and the hum of the fridge. I'd sit at our small kitchen table with my laptop open, the glow of a spreadsheet reflecting off my glasses, and my eyes would keep drifting to the empty chair across from me. I'd text him, "What time are you thinking you'll be back?" Sometimes he'd respond, "Late. Don't wait up." Sometimes there'd be nothing at all until the front door opened at 1 or 2 in the morning. And here's the thing, I'm not a jealous person. I've never been that woman who grabs phones out of hands or calls every 5 minutes demanding updates. I don't have the time or the emotional energy to be a full-time detective in my own relationship. But when your boyfriend is essentially living somewhere else half the week and refuses to tell you where or why, you start to notice. One Friday night in early January, I decided I couldn't keep pretending this was normal. He was standing by the door, lacing his shoes with quick, irritated movements, already half turned away like he was trying to leave the conversation before it started. "Where are you headed?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Out," he said. I smiled tightly. "Yeah, I figured that part. Out where?" "Why do you need to know?" He straightened, eyes narrowing. "Because you're gone almost every night now, and I barely see you anymore," I said, feeling my heart rate pick up even though I was doing everything I could to sound calm. "I'm just trying to understand what's going on." He stopped, hands on his hips, like I'd just accused him of something unforgivable. "I'm allowed to have a life outside this relationship, Elise." "I know that," I said quickly. "I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying it would be nice to know where you are sometimes. We live together. It's not unreasonable." "You're being controlling." The word hit me like a slap. "I'm asking a question," I said quietly. "I'm not ordering you to stay home." "You're interrogating me. There's a difference." "How is asking where you're going interrogating you?" My voice cracked, just a little. "You won't tell me anything. You keep saying a friend, like it's classified information. If you just told me what you were doing, I wouldn't have to ask." He grabbed his bag with a sharp, impatient movement. "I told you, I'm going to my friend's place. She's going through a lot and needs support. I'll be back tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I repeated. "You're staying out all night?" "Yes," he lifted his chin. "Is that a problem?" "It's just—" I swallowed. The room felt suddenly too small. "You've been staying out a lot lately, almost every night, and you won't tell me what's actually going on." "I told you," he snapped. "My friend needs me." "What friend?" I asked, the words coming out before I could soften them. "You keep saying my friend, but you won't even tell me who it is." "It's private." "We're in a relationship," I said. "We live together. There shouldn't be this many secrets." He opened the door halfway, then turned back to look at me, eyes cold. "I need space," he said. "You're being too much right now." And then he left. The door closed with a dull final sound. I stood there in the quiet, my heart thudding in my chest, my mind trying to rearrange everything he'd just said into something that made sense. Controlling, needy, interrogating. Those weren't words anyone had used about me before. I was the sensible one, the reliable one, the woman who kept her life, and usually everyone else's, organized and running. But as I stood alone in our apartment, it hit me like a slow, sinking weight. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just the secrecy. It wasn't just the late nights. It was the way every perfectly reasonable question turned into an accusation against me. The way he'd started to make me feel like the problem for wanting basic information. I stared at the closed door for a long time, then at my own reflection in the dark window. For the first time in months, I didn't immediately rush to soothe myself with excuses on his behalf. Instead, a quiet, steady thought formed in the back of my mind. If there was nothing to hide, he wouldn't be working this hard to hide it. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done ignoring that feeling. 2 weeks after that Friday night argument, I was done tiptoeing around it. In those 2 weeks, nothing got better. If anything, it got worse. The late nights became later. The overnight stays became more casual, less explained. "I'm at my friend's. I'll be back tomorrow," became a text he sent without even pretending to ask if I minded. One morning, after he'd been gone all night, he came home around 10 while I was making coffee. "Morning," I said, watching him drop his keys in the little tray by the door, like everything was completely normal. "Morning," he replied, going straight for the mug cabinet. "How's your friend?" I asked. "The one you've been helping." He poured coffee, his back to me. "She's okay, still struggling, but managing." "What's going on with her exactly?" I leaned against the counter, pretending this was casual curiosity and not me trying to understand where my boyfriend actually lived half the week. "It's complicated," he said. "She's going through a bad breakup." "That's rough," I said. "But you've been there almost every night for weeks. Seems like a lot." "She needs consistent support, Elise. I can't just abandon her." "I'm not saying you should," I said. "I'm just saying it's affecting us. You're never here. We don't spend time together anymore." He set his mug down harder than necessary. "Maybe if you weren't so needy, I'd want to be here more." It landed like a punch to the stomach. Needy. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. There was a part of me that wanted to scream, "Do you hear yourself? Do you hear what you're saying?" But another part of me, the part that had spent months trying to be the reasonable one, just swallowed the hurt and listened. "You can't handle me having friends or a life outside of you," he continued. "You want to know where I am every second. It's suffocating." I stared at him, the kettle whistling softly behind me. "I'm fine with you having friends," I said. "What I'm not fine with is being completely in the dark about where you are and what you're doing most nights. That's not me being needy. That's me asking for basic communication." "I don't owe you a detailed schedule," he snapped. I'm not asking for a schedule, I said quietly. I'm asking for honesty. He picked up his mug again, glare sharp. I'm being honest. You just don't like the answer. What answer? I asked. You won't tell me anything concrete, just a friend, and it's complicated. He walked past me, bumping my shoulder, just enough to make a point. Drop it, Elise, he said. You're making this into a bigger deal than it is. He disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me standing in the kitchen with the smell of coffee and burnt toast, wondering when asking where my boyfriend spent half his week had become making a big deal out of nothing. That was the morning I stopped fully believing him. I didn't say that out loud. I still smiled at work, still answered texts from friends like everything was fine. But inside, something had stepped back from him, folded its arms, and started paying very close attention. By the time that Tuesday evening rolled around, I wasn't just suspicious. I was tired. Tired of the vague answers. Tired of the late nights. Tired of feeling like the villain in my own relationship. He was by the door again, tying his shoes. His overnight bag was already leaning against the wall, like this was a planned trip, not a spontaneous emergency for some unnamed friend. Where are you going? I asked. Out, he said. To your friend's place? I kept my tone even, like we were talking about the weather. Yes, he didn't look up. I watched him for a second, the way his jaw clenched, the way his shoulders went rigid like he was bracing for impact. Can you give me the address? I asked. He froze. Why? His voice came out sharp. Because you're there constantly, I said. If something happened, I should know where you are, in case of an emergency. Nothing's going to happen. That's not the point, I said. It's just practical. What if there was a car accident? What if your phone died? What if I needed to reach you and couldn't? That's paranoid, he said, straightening up. It's not paranoid, I replied. It's reasonable. You're my boyfriend. We live together. I should know where you're spending half your time. No, he grabbed his bag. I'm not giving you the address. Why not? I asked, my heart beating hard, but my voice staying oddly calm. Because it's invasive, he said. You don't trust me. I'm trying to trust you, I said, feeling that tiny tremor of anger under my ribs. But you're making it really hard when you won't tell me basic information. I don't have to tell you everything, he shot back. This isn't everything, I said. This is where you are, most nights. There's a difference. He glared at me, eyes bright with something that looked a lot like hatred or fear or both. Stop asking where I stay at night, he said, each word clipped. Respect my space. There it was. Not just the late nights. Not just the vagueness. Not just the defensiveness. The outright refusal to let me even know where he was sleeping. I felt something in me go very, very still. Okay, I said softly. He blinked. Okay, he repeated, suspicious. I stood up from the armchair, smoothing my hands over my jeans like I was brushing off dust. Enjoy your space, I said. For a moment, he looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't tell if I was backing down or winding up. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. It means I'm done asking, I said. You clearly don't want me involved in whatever this is, so go stay wherever you want. Do whatever you want. I don't care anymore. You're being dramatic, he scoffed. I'm being realistic, I said. You want space? You've got it. He stared at me for another second, weighing whether to keep arguing. Then he grabbed his bag, opened the door, and walked out. The door shut behind him with that same dull, final sound. I stood there in the silence of my own apartment, the hum of the fridge suddenly loud, the street noise faint through the windows. For a few minutes, I just stood. I thought about every conversation where he'd turned my questions into character flaws, every time he'd called me needy, controlling, suffocating. Every night I'd sat alone at the kitchen table, pretending this was just a rough patch and not a slow exit. And then very quietly, my mind shifted gears. Fine, I thought. You don't want me to know where you're staying? I don't need you to tell me. I realized something in that moment that my therapist would put into words much later. I had spent months waiting for him to hand me honesty he was never going to give. I walked to the bedroom and looked around. His clothes in the closet, his shoes lined up by the door, his toothbrush in the bathroom, his razor by the sink. All the little markers of we live together that had started to feel less like comfort and more like clutter from a life I wasn't actually living with him anymore. If he wanted space so badly, I could give it to him. All of it. I took a deep breath, opened the closet, and pulled out the first armful of his clothes. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. I just started packing. I packed his things for almost 3 hours. Not out of fury, not out of heartbreak. Out of clarity. Clothes first. Shirts he never folded properly, jackets he always hung on the wrong hook, the hoodie he wore every night he stayed home, which, I realize now, had become rare. Shoes next. His toiletries. his beard trimmer, which shed tiny metal hairs everywhere no matter how often he promised to clean it, his books, the ones he left scattered in places he knew I'd eventually tidy. It was surprisingly easy, in the quiet of the bedroom, with only the soft thump of items being folded and zipped into bags, almost meditative. By the time I finished, I had 4 large bags and 2 boxes stacked by the door. And I wasn't angry. Just done. Done with the lies. Done with the evasiveness. Done with being told I was the problem for noticing the problem. As I taped the last box shut, I hesitated. For weeks, something about his routine had nagged at me. Not just the secrecy, but the confidence. The almost smug certainty that I wouldn't question him, that I would stay confused, apologizing, off balance. People lie differently when they believe you'll never find out. His desk sat against the wall, a simple wooden thing I bought on sale, now cluttered with envelopes, old receipts, random paperwork, and that little ceramic cup he used for loose change. I stared at it. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but I wasn't ashamed either. He'd spent months lying to my face, making me doubt my own instincts, and I had tried every possible way to get clarity without crossing a line. He chose this, not me. I pulled out the chair and began sorting through the papers. Most of it was junk. Old insurance forms, parking receipts, flyers from a gym he never actually joined. But near the bottom of a stack, tucked between 2 grocery receipts, I found something that didn't belong. A small envelope, cream-colored, feminine handwriting, a floral border. Addressed to him, but signed by her. His ex-girlfriend, Mara Sinclair. My pulse slowed, not sped up, slowed, like my body was preparing for impact. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a thank you card. Elegant, expensive cardstock, the kind of thing people buy when they want the message to feel important. And her handwriting? Thank you for letting me stay over so often. You've been such a support during this confusing time. I don't know what I'd do without you. Letting me stay over. Not letting us crash. Not thanks for helping my friend. Not thanks for our talks. Letting me stay over. Often. I read it twice, then a third time. There was no way to explain this away. No angle where this meant something innocent. No interpretation where Darren hadn't been lying to me, repeatedly, for months. And on the back of the envelope, neatly printed, was her address. A 25-minute drive, nice neighborhood, well-kept townhomes. His friend, his secrecy, his defensiveness, his obsession with space. All of it clicked into place with sickening ease. I closed the card, slid it back into the envelope, and returned it to the exact spot I found it. Then I picked up his bags one by one and carried them to my car. The night air was cool, the streetlights soft and indifferent. I loaded the bags into the trunk, the boxes into the back seat, locked the apartment behind me, and drove. The whole way there, my mind was strangely quiet. Not spinning, not imagining confrontation. Just steady. I pulled up across from Mara's address. The townhouses looked freshly painted, lined with neat shrubs, porch lights glowing. Her car was in the driveway. His car was parked behind it. That image alone, those 2 cars parked like residents, told me more than any confession ever would. I got out, grabbed one bag, then another, then the boxes, carried them all to the porch, step by step, placing them neatly, almost politely, in front of her door. My hands didn't shake. When everything was arranged, I stood there for a moment, looking at the pile. 4 years of his belongings, 4 months of his lies, 1 final delivery. I reached out and pressed the doorbell. 1 firm ring, then I turned and walked calmly back to my car. I had just buckled my seatbelt when I saw the door swing open in my rearview mirror. First, Mara stepped out, tall, slim, her face illuminated by the porch light. Behind her, Darren appeared, the 2 of them framed in that warm light, staring at the bags he never expected would arrive at that doorstep. Mara's expression went from curiosity, confusion, realization, dread. Darren's went from shock, panic, anger, something hollow and terrified underneath all of it. I didn't give them the satisfaction of turning around. I put the car in drive and gently pulled away. No screaming, no scene, no begging, no explanation owed or needed. By the time I reached my apartment again, the locksmith had already confirmed he was on his way. I paid extra for same-day service because clarity without boundaries is just chaos. By 9 p.m., the locks were changed. By 10 p.m., the first calls came in. 15 missed calls in a row. Then texts from new numbers when I started blocking the old ones. What the hell did you do? Answer your phone. We need to talk. You can't just kick me out. I'm coming over. We're discussing this like adults. I didn't respond. Not one word. At midnight, I heard knocking, then pounding. Elise, open the door, right now! I didn't move. I picked up my phone, turned on white noise, and put it face down beside me. And for the first time in months, I slept without wondering where he was. The next morning, sunlight woke me before my alarm did. For a moment, I forgot everything. I stretched, rolled to the other side of the bed, and didn't feel the usual weight of his overnight bag sitting on the floor. Didn't hear the faint sound of him breathing in his sleep. Didn't smell his cologne lingering in the sheets. The space was empty, quiet, clean, peaceful. Then I saw my phone. 37 missed calls, twice as many texts, and a voicemail from an unknown number that started with, "Elise, what the hell is wrong with you?" Deleted. I made coffee instead. Real, slow brew coffee. My favorite mug. My exact amount of sugar. No compromise. No adjusting to someone else's preferences. It was almost luxurious. By the time I sat down at the kitchen counter with my first sip, my phone was buzzing again. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I wasn't curious anymore. Eventually, I did open it, not to read anything, but to block the new numbers, like swatting away mosquitoes. Annoying, but hardly a threat. I thought that was going to be the end of it. I was wrong. Around noon, a number I didn't recognize called me. I answered without thinking, expecting it to be work. Hello? The voice on the other end was sharp, indignant, and familiar. What did you do to my son? Ah, his mother. I leaned against the counter, sipped my coffee, and waited for her to finish inhaling outrage. Good morning, I said calmly. If you're calling about Darren's living situation, I moved his belongings to where he's been staying. Staying? She repeated. He told me you threw him out for no reason, that you changed the locks, that you blindsided him. I didn't blindside him, I said. He's been spending nights at another woman's house for months. I simply made things official. That's not true, she snapped. He told me he was helping a female friend who was going through a breakup. Yes, I said, Mara, his ex-girlfriend. Silence. Not a crackling phone glitch silence. A heavy, guilty silence. He was helping her, she tried weakly. He was staying with her, I corrected. Another hollow pause. I could practically hear her scrambling to reform her narrative, trying to find an angle that made all of this my fault. He still loved you, she insisted. He didn't love me enough, to be honest. Elise. I've returned his things, I said. The relationship is over. Please don't call me again. I hung up before she could respond. Then I blocked her number too. Right after that, more texts came from unknown numbers. Long paragraphs. Some insults. Some pleadings. Some half-baked explanations. Some guilt trips disguised as concern. I blocked them all. That evening, someone buzzed my apartment from downstairs. BZT, BZT, BZT. 5 times before I walked over and checked the camera feed. It was his brother. He looked irritated, arms crossed, jaw set like he was preparing for a lecture. I pressed the intercom button. I'm not opening the door, I said. We need to talk, he replied, leaning toward the camera. You can't just end things like this. He's devastated. You're overreacting. You need to talk to him in person. No, I said. I really don't. This isn't reasonable, he pushed. You're throwing away 4 years over a misunderstanding. I let out a small breath through my nose. What misunderstanding? I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He clearly had no answer. Darren hadn't told him anything real. He said you wouldn't listen, the brother tried again. He had months to talk, I said. Every time I asked where he was, he lied. That's not miscommunication. That's betrayal. He wasn't cheating, he argued. I don't care if he was or wasn't, I replied. He built a whole separate life with someone else. That's enough. He scowled at the camera. You're being heartless. I'm being done, I said. Please leave. If you don't, I'll call building security. He muttered something under his breath and walked off. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel shaken. Just tired. But the kind of tired you feel after finishing something exhausting. Something overdue. For the next week, Darren tried everything. He showed up at my workplace. I had security escort him out. He tried messaging me through mutual friends. I told those friends that if they kept relaying anything from him, I'd have to distance myself. Most understood. The ones who didn't, well, I let them drift. On day 8, a mutual friend I actually respected called me. Someone who rarely took sides. Someone who'd known us both long before we were a couple. Elise, she said, I heard something happened. I'm sure you did, I said. She's telling people, the friend continued carefully, that you overreacted, that you kicked him out over nothing. Is that what she believes? I asked with a small laugh, or what he told her. The friend hesitated. So what actually happened? He's been staying at his ex-girlfriend's house 3 or 4 nights a week, I said plainly, for months. He lied every time I asked. He made me feel crazy for noticing. A long silence. Finally, she said quietly, he didn't mention any of that. Of course he didn't. Are they together? The friend asked. I don't know, I said, and I don't care. The point is, he lied, repeatedly, while using my apartment as a storage locker and emotional safety net. She exhaled slowly. That's messed up. Yeah, I said. I thought so too. What are you going to do now? I already did it, I said. I moved on. She was quiet, then said, I'm sorry this happened, Elise. For what it's worth, you're not crazy. Anyone would have reacted the same. Her validation settled over me like warm water. Thank you, I said softly, and I meant it. A few days later, I ran into one of Darren's old friends at a coffee shop. Someone who'd always been polite, if not particularly close to me. She looked uncomfortable the moment she spotted me. Elise, she said, shifting her bag on her shoulder. Hi. Hi, I said, stirring my tea. I heard what happened, she said awkwardly. I just want you to know, I think you did the right thing. I raised an eyebrow. Do you? She nodded hesitantly. He's been living with her for 2 months now. Ah, so that was the timeline. Living with her, I repeated. Yeah, and she keeps telling everyone they're not together, but they go everywhere together, post everything together. Honestly, it looks like a relationship to me. Did you tell her that? I tried, the woman grimaced. She said I was judging her. I lifted my mug. Well, I said, some people can't stand the mirror. She didn't argue. Some of us know what really happened, she added. She can say whatever she wants. Anyone paying attention knows the truth. I appreciate that, I said. Are you okay? She asked. I smiled, small but real. I'm getting there. She nodded and left, looking relieved to have said her piece. I sat there for a moment, letting the steam from my tea warm my face, letting it sink in. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a version. Everyone had a story. But only one thing mattered. I wasn't in his story anymore. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like freedom. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. My life got quiet. Not the lonely kind of quiet, not the echoing kind that makes the walls feel closer. A clean quiet, a peaceful one, a quiet where I could hear myself think again. For the first time in months, my evenings belonged to me. My weekends belonged to me. My home felt like mine again, not a halfway house for someone who slept somewhere else but still kept their stuff in my closet. I went back to the gym, not obsessively, just consistently, moving my body in ways that felt good instead of punishing. I pulled out my little cast iron skillet and started cooking again. Real meals, the kind that made the apartment smell warm and safe. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen much in the last year because I'd spent so much time waiting for Darren to come home, waiting for him to respond, waiting for things to go back to normal. Normal was gone, and honestly, good riddance. One weekend, on a whim, I threw a backpack into my car, drove 3 hours north into the mountains, booked a cheap cabin, and hiked until my legs burned. I slept with the window open and woke up to cold air and birds. No missed calls, no text demanding explanations, no emotional landmines waiting for me. Just freedom. When I got home, I decided it might be time to talk to someone, not a friend. Someone trained, impartial. A therapist. I didn't go because I was falling apart. I went because I finally had space in my head to ask, why did I stay that long? Why did I accept so little information? Why did I let someone twist my instincts into flaws? My therapist listened, nodded, and then said something that stopped me cold. You weren't crazy. You were being told you were crazy. And there's a difference. I sat with that for days. Because that was it. That was the whole truth wrapped neatly in one sentence. I wasn't needy. I wasn't controlling. I wasn't suffocating. I just wanted honesty. And someone who did not want to give it found it easier to attack the questioner than the lie. After that session, everything became sharper, clearer. My boundaries, my instincts, my self-respect. 2 months after I'd dropped Darren's things at Mara's place, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that they'd finally gone public. A picture of them at a brewery, his arm around her waist, her caption something nauseating like, "Finally found someone who truly understands me." I laughed when I saw it, not bitter, not wounded, just amused. It was always going to be her. The only surprise was how long he'd tried to keep both lives going at once. A few weeks later, a friend convinced me to go on a date. Not rebound, not revenge. Just a date. The guy was nice, easy to talk to, funny without trying so hard, normal in a way that felt refreshing instead of boring. Over dinner, he asked gently, So, what happened with your last relationship? I gave him the short version. He started staying at another woman's house 3 or 4 nights a week, I said, and wouldn't tell me where he was. I found proof, dropped his things off there, changed the locks, and moved on. The guy blinked, then nodded slowly. Yeah, he said, lying is a deal breaker. Simple, direct. No twisting my intentions. No pretending reasonable questions were interrogations. We went on 2 more dates. It didn't become anything serious, but it reminded me that honesty exists. Decency exists. People who communicate exist. And I hadn't imagined all of that. One afternoon, months after everything had settled, a coworker asked me casually if I missed Darren. I didn't even have to think. No, I said, not even a little. Because what exactly would I be missing? Someone who lied daily? Someone who made me question my own sanity? Someone who accused me of being controlling for wanting to know where he slept? Someone who turned every question into a flaw of mine? No, I didn't miss that. I didn't miss feeling like my chest was in a knot every time he left the apartment. I didn't miss sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair, telling myself not to worry. I didn't miss tiptoeing around his moods, pretending everything was fine when every instinct screamed otherwise. What I had now, quiet mornings, peaceful evenings, a home that was actually a home, was worth more than anything I lost. People sometimes asked if I ever found out whether he and Mara were physical before I left. Honestly, I didn't care. The emotional betrayal was enough. The secrecy was enough. The months of lies were enough. Whether they crossed the final line before or after I walked away didn't change a thing. He had already checked out. He had already left the relationship. I just happened to be the last to know. I stopped looking for closure from him. I stopped checking social media. I stopped monitoring mutual friends' updates. I blocked everyone connected to him, not out of spite, out of self-preservation. I started over. And now, at 36, living alone in my clean, quiet apartment, waking up without dread, coming home without guessing games, I feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the fragile kind that breaks when someone slams a door. The sturdy kind you build yourself. One clear boundary at a time. One truth at a time. One decision to walk away when someone shows you exactly who they are. People ask sometimes if I regret how I ended it. I don't. There was no dramatic confrontation, no screaming match, no final pleading conversation, no chance for him to manipulate the narrative again. Just clarity. A door closing. A quiet night of uninterrupted sleep. And a life that became mine again. If I learned anything, it's this. Sometimes trusting yourself means letting go before someone else gives you permission. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. And sometimes the cleanest endings come when you stop chasing explanations and simply choose peace. I chose it, and I'm not giving it back.